Okay, I think we'll get started. Good morning. It's so wonderful to see all of you. My name is Elizabeth Richards. I'm the director of the Chandler Center at Southern New Hampshire University. This program, Strength Over Suppression, has been more than a year in the making. And I have to tell you, when Theo and Brooke Gilmore and Caleb Page and I gathered in the Women's Center on campus over a year ago and began the planning of this program, I had no idea I would be sitting here, staring at little boxes on a screen, kicking my kids off the internet as they homeschool for fear that my internet connection would go out. This is not the program that we imagined a year ago, but we are in many ways really excited at the way that it came about, because so many of you get to be here that wouldn't have otherwise been able to join us on campus. So always looking for those silver linings. We're glad to see so many people from so many places all over the world joining us this morning. This event is a celebration of so many things and a recognition of so many things. Each year at Southern New Hampshire University, we plan a program for Constitution Day, which is the anniversary of the signing of the United States Constitution in 1787. So when we started a year ago talking about what our Constitution Day programming might look like, we knew that it was also the centennial of the ratification of the 19th Amendment, which gave white women access to the vote. And so we knew that we wanted to have a program that both honored and celebrated the passage of the 19th Amendment, while also acknowledging and exploring and learning about the women who were not given access with the passage of the 19th Amendment to the Constitution 100 years ago. So when Theo mentioned that she had a contact with Barbara Arnwine, who has been part of every civil rights voting legislation movement in the past 30 years, we knew we had our program. So this event is brought to you by Southern New Hampshire University and their Office of Diversity Programs, their Deborah Coffin Women's Center, the Chandler Center, and then additionally the Global Citizen Circle and the New Hampshire Women's Foundation. It's really just been a powerhouse group of women to work with in planning this, and it's been a delight. I do want to let you all know that we are recording this program. And so if you would prefer to not be on camera, you can simply stop your video and then you will be part of the recording. But we are recording it so that we can share it with professors who want to share it with their classes who couldn't be here this morning. So finally, it's my joy to introduce you to our moderator for this event. Shanita Williams is the Associate Vice President of Talent Engagement and Inclusion at Southern New Hampshire University. She was our first choice for moderator for this event because you'll soon see that she is warm and engaging and thoughtful and brilliant, and there was nobody else who wanted. So thank you all again for being here, and Shanita, over to you.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth, for that warm welcome. And hello to all of you. It is so great and such an honor to be in community with each of you today. Today, we come together to recognize, as Elizabeth said, Constitution Day and honor the 100th anniversary of the passage of the 19th Amendment, which expanded the constitutional rights to vote for women. And in it, it reads, "The right of citizens of the United States to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of sex." And this historic milestone finally recognized that women deserved all the rights and responsibilities to citizenship like men. And we know, though, that the road to the 19th Amendment was not easy. And the background is probably noisy because it's not easy cutting the lawn, and my neighbors are cutting the lawn right now, so I apologize. But the road to the 19th Amendment was not easy. And it certainly did not happen quickly. And it didn't even happen because of just one person or one event. It happened because of the collective voices of the women's suffrage movement, where women leaders marched and advocated and protested collectively for decades to finally gain the constitutional right to vote. And that year, 8 million women across the United States voted in elections for the very first time. And while the 19th Amendment prevented states from denying people the right to vote based on their gender, some states, as we know, engaged in voter suppression tactics that prevented people from voting based on their race, which meant Black women and men were not able to exercise their right to vote, even with the passage of the 19th Amendment. Now, Black women played an important role in passing the 19th Amendment, and they continued to fight for equality for several decades to secure suffrage. Now, the passage of the Voting Rights Act of 1965 finally enabled millions of African Americans and communities of color an equal opportunity to vote because it banned racial discrimination and voting practices. And today, we have more than 68 million women who vote in elections because of the courageous suffragists who never gave up the fight for equality. And today, that fight continues, and it's an honor to be in community with one of those fighters on the front line, continuing to advocate for equality, Barbara Arnwine, who is our guest today. She is a courageous woman, and I will tell you, her resume and her experiences, I mean, they're tremendous. And it would probably take 100 years to actually read it to you because she is truly accomplished and contributed so much in the world. So I'll just say just a few words about her before we invite her formally into the circle to share her story. Now, we know that Barbara is known internationally for her contributions on critical justice issues, but she is also currently teaching at Columbia University School of Law, facilitating workshops around intersectionality alongside Kimberly Crenshaw, examining both the theoretical frame and the expansive practice in law, human rights, and social justice advocacy. And she serves on so many voting rights organizations as either chair or facilitator, and we have her here with us today, which is such an honor. So let's give a warm virtual welcome to Barbara Arnwine. Barbara, it is such an honor to have you with us today. Thank you for joining us. Now, as we join in the conversation together, we'd love for you to just start off and tell us what drew you to fighting to ensure everyone has an equal opportunity to fully exercise their right to vote.
Well, first of all, thank you so much. Thanks for having me. Thanks for everyone who put this program together. And thank you for that warm introduction, Shanita. That was beautiful. I really appreciate it. It is an honor to be here and to present to everyone and just to talk today. Voting rights is such an important part of the African-American experience. It's so key, it's so central. I knew very early in my life that I needed to vote. I was one of those kids whose parents, told them about voting, took us with them to the polling place, which I think is essential. That's something all parents should do, is to take their children to the polling place so that they understand that this is part of being a citizen. It's part of the exercise of that right. But I am very conscious, very driven by the fact that that's not always been the truth. And that for many, many decades, centuries, African Americans were denied the right to vote. If I may, I'll just share, something on the screen that might help to elucidate this particular point. And here we go. I did it. There's hope. This is I love to talk about the history of the fight for voting rights by African Americans in this country. I just want everyone to know that this is Voting Rights Month, and Voting Rights Month is September 1st through October the 6th. And it stops on October the 6th and not on the end of September because of a woman named Fannie Lou Hamer. And Fannie Lou Hamer's birthday is October 6th. When you ask me, what inspires me to fight for the right to vote, she is at the top of that list with Harriet Tubman and so many other incredible, legendary figures in our history. But one of the things I always, this is a new series that we're doing, but this is what I wanted to get to. This is a teaching tool I use, and that's the Voting Rights Circle. And basically, all I want to point out for now with this circle is that the fight for the vote for African Americans did not start in the 1960s, did not start in the 1800s. Actually, we can find records of Blacks petitioning and fighting for their right to vote, to be full citizens as early as the 1600s. You know, Africans were brought to this country in chains, enslaved in 1619, but we find records in the 1600s of people, free Blacks who said, I'm free, because people were industrious. They fought for their freedom. They did everything they could. And some people achieved that ability to be free. And immediately upon freedom, they wanted the same rights as everybody else.
Oh, really?
That's the only reason why.
So that's what you see. So basically, a lot of times that right to vote was denied because of people fearing that the, quote, slaves, the freed people would incite slaves who were still people who were still, quote, enslaved Africans to fight for freedom. So the right to vote was very weird in the colonies. You had colonies that gave full rights. You have colonies that did not acknowledge any kind of right. And in fact, people who suffered because they even asked for that right. But I just wanted to say that, and that this voting rights circle goes from vote denial to vote denial or current state of voter suppression. So just a way of explaining, you know, some of our dilemmas, some of where we are now.
Thank you for that, Barbara. And when you think about, I mean, to your point, that this has been a long fight, this has been a long journey, and the work continues. Can you reflect on a situation when you were up against odds, you know, in this fight and trying to advocate, where you felt overwhelmed by just the enormity of it all, but you were still able to stay motivated and keep pressing on? Can you talk with us a little bit about an example of that experience? And
unfortunately, there's too many examples. You know, when you're a woman of color in this country, I mean, you're constantly challenged. In fact, it was hilarious. Last night, yesterday I was in a meeting with someone, and one of the participants in the meeting said, well, can you point me to somebody who's a voting rights expert? And, and a number of people participating. Hold on.
Barbara, maybe you can also stop sharing your screen so we can see you as you talk.
Okay. Alrighty. Hold on. So. All right. Yes, just, you know, we got a lot of hay fever today, a lot of allergies in the air. So everybody I'm talking to who has allergies are suffering today. But what I was going to say is, so we were in this discussion, and the guy says, I need, you know, a voting rights expert. And do you know of one that you can point us to who really knows voting rights law? And the man said, so the guy said, well, she is one of the nation's foremost experts on voting rights. And everybody knows that, you know, that's why Congress has her testify, et cetera, et cetera. And he still said, I want a voting rights expert. So it shows you that sometimes, no matter how much your credentials are there, how long the resume may be, all the cases that you've argued, everything, that people just cannot overcome their stereotypes in their head of what a Black woman is capable of doing. So that's it.
Thank you for sharing that, Barbara. You know, and you're right, like we all, every day we bring our experiences and our past, and it's that paradigm that we look at the world each day and trying to challenge that and help people think differently, right? We have to evolve, and as we encounter new people, challenge some of those things. But unfortunately, sorry to hear about your experience. And we definitely know that you are definitely an expert in this space. As you think about now the 100th anniversary, and you think about the women's suffrage in relation to the Black experience, kind of what's your thoughts as you reflect on the anniversary and just the experience of Black women past and present?
Well, there's so many amazing Black women in the past who I just, I want to just introduce you to a few of them, and to say that they inspire me all the time. One person who I really want to talk about, everybody's heard about her, is Harriet Tubman. And Harriet Tubman really inspires people. And most people know her story. They know about how she freed people from slavery, how she put her own life at risk, how she had a tremendous disability, a sleeping disorder that was the result of having been hit in the head with a metal weight by by a slave master who was angry at another person and was throwing the weight to hit that person and hit her instead, and how it caused, for the rest of her life, all kinds of medical problems, all kinds of injuries. But nevertheless, even though she knew she had this disability and could fall asleep at any moment, she nevertheless went and freed over 379 people, or over, we believe, over 60 different missions. But one of the stories people don't know about her that I just love, because, erasure is part of our reality as women of color, is that our accomplishments get erased, our stories get lost. But one of the things that people don't know about is that she was the first woman in the United States to lead men, troops into war. She actually, for the Kabachi River raid, Kabachi Ferry, the Kabachi River Ferry raid, she led troops, 700 or more troops, and into battle. And basically what they did was that they floated up the river, and they demanded that all the slaves in the surrounding plantations be freed. The troops did what they had to do, and over 1,000, we believe about 1,000, formerly 1,000 Africans who were enslaved were freed. They came running to the ships. They got on the ships, and they were taken down the river to freedom. And that's a true story, and people don't get that story. The other story that I find fascinating is that even though she did that, even though she was a Union spy, because people didn't expect a, quote, illiterate Black woman could have the ability to actually engage in reconnaissance, she was a very effective spy because of that, because people did not suspect her of being anything but a, quote, servant. The other thing is that when she left the Union Army, and years later when she applied for her pension, they wouldn't give it to her. She never got her pension. The only way she got any money from the US Army was because her husband, a man, had served. So, all of these contradictions that women go through, she represents them. Remember, she was beaten. She's a woman who was thrown off a train for not giving up her seats, to the whites, or sitting in the same cabin as the whites and refusing to be moved. And they threw her violently off the train. She had to have brain surgery for the injuries that she sustained. She also, there's so many stories about her that people just don't know. And one of the stories I love is that as part of her erasure is the erasure of her beauty. I mean, she was a beautiful woman. And all the pictures we have is of this woman with the corn cob and looking all harsh and stuff. But fortunately, the picture evolved recently of her in her full beauty. And because if you look at the wanted poster for her when she escaped, it talks about this beautiful woman. It calls her pretty, comely, gorgeous. So, so much that we do to live in what I call role shackling. Role shackling is the notion that certain women or certain races are only capable of certain things as part of intersectionality. And so she motivates me strongly, very strongly.
Is there a particular, oh, I'm sorry. Shanita, we had the question. I'm not sure if B. Widger would just like to ask it yourself. Go ahead and speak.
Unmuted myself now.
There you go.
Yeah, is there a particular book on Harriet Tubman that you would recommend that includes these things we haven't heard about her?
You know, there's a really beautiful play that you can find online, put on by the African American Policy Forum, aapf.org, that really does credit, more so than what I told you about her history. And my professor, Kim Crenshaw wrote the play, and it's really great. It's probably the best teaching tool that's out there. The books, you know, there are some books on her, but I don't think any really capture her in her fullness yet. Because even in some of the best scholarship that's been done, it's missing a lot of this. So it's a reminder to all of you young scholars out there that there's still work to be done. There's still compilations of history to be really fully told. Because when the picture came out of her, I think it was about 5 years ago, that showed, you know, her in this, you know, incredible glory, and her, you know, dressed up beautifully. Folks were shocked, but they missed the fact that there are interviews with her, or there's descriptions of her at the Kabachi River raid that talked about how gorgeously dressed she was and how beautiful she looked. When she's calling these slaves, these enslaved people, to come and free themselves, and thousands and hundreds of people are running, she's standing, they describe her in this incredible emerald dress, this emerald outfit, just being beautiful, because that's what she did. And people just, you know, that whole part of her personality has been lost, you know, to history. And instead, you know, she's been made into almost this masculine, you know, image when she was quite feminine. So, you know, there's all these things to be told. And so there's a lot of history to still be written about her.
Thank you so much for that, Barbara. Really great kind of points for us to think about, continuing to learn and extending that learning beyond what is maybe right in front of us, but digging for some of those deeper stories to just learn about the names and the people and the experiences that go untold. Really appreciate that. As you think about, I know you and I had a chance to talk as well about other people that inspire you.
Yes.
You know, you had mentioned Ruth Ginsburg, and I don't know if you want to just share any thoughts there.
Oh my goodness, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, what can you say? I mean, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, once again, is one of those stories. Imagine being first in your class in law school and coming out and not one law firm will hire you. Imagine, you know, just think about that. Yet you don't give up. You keep on, you know, working. You become a women's rights advocate. But you know what I really love about Ruth Bader Ginsburg is that she has said publicly, that without Pauli Murray, there is no Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And Pauli Murray is just totally erased for most purposes. In our women's lexicon, in our women's pantheon, fighters, we just don't know the story of Pauli Murray. It's P-A-U-L-I, Murray, M-U-R-R-A-Y. And she talked about how it was Pauli Murray's legal theories that she wrote, that Ginsburg read and studied, that led her to the theoretical frameworks that she used in fighting for women's equality. And, you know, and I love that, because how many women, white women, will give a Black woman that kind of stature, that kind of recognition, and say, without her, I don't exist? That's very rare. And what I also want to point out is that Pauli Murray was brilliant. And not only was she absolutely brilliant in law school, she wrote an article as part of classwork. I mean, this is something for all the students to think about. She writes an article, it's just part of her classwork, on how do you desegregate America. So this is back in the early 1950s. And she writes this amazing piece, and her professors are blown away by it because it's so well done. And years later, when Charles Hamilton Houston is talking with Thurgood Marshall about the Brown versus Board of Education, what becomes Brown versus Board of Education, all the consolidated cases from around the country that are fighting segregation in education, he says to Thurgood, you gotta read Pauley's article, because this is the theoretical framework we need to use to win this case. And he gives him her student article, and her student article becomes the basis for Brown versus Board. Another untold story, because people just don't give women of color their due. And I just really was so moved by Ginsburg's recognition of her. But I wish I could put the picture up, but in 2014, she and I were co-honorees by the Washington Bar Association for what's called the Charles Hamilton Houston Medallion. And she and I had the pleasure of being joint honorees, co-honorees, and receiving our medallions together. And what's so hilarious is I asked her while we were meeting and doing our talking during the dinner event, I asked her, I said, what do you think about people calling you Notorious RBG? And what's your reaction to that? And she told me, she said, Barbara, she says, I never saw it coming. She says, I find it highly amusing. And I just love that. It was one of my favorite conversations with her. Amazing woman. And what I love about her, not only is her ability to give credit where credit was due, and to rise above so many stereotypes that lawyers have, but what I love about her is that she had what I call an expansive vision of justice, an expansive vision of equality. She fought not only for women's rights, not only for women's inclusion, not only for women's equality. She was one of the #1 fighters for voting rights. In the Shelby case, and this year in the RNC versus DNC case, she never, she made her fight about, people of color. She made her fight about immigrants, where she stood on immigrant rights. She was one of the major proponents of LGBTQIA rights. I mean, she was just, a really amazing woman who saw justice in a broad way, who understood that all people, no matter what their intersectional difference may be, are entitled to dignity, entitled to absolute, complete, free dignity. I love that about her. I just, I think that she would have been hard to replace no matter who was president, but I am so disgusted that I'm worried about we're living in a time where mockery may be made of her legacy by appointing somebody who is an anti-woman, an anti-civil rights, an anti-racial equality person. I worry about it every single day right now, or our day is not putting it right, every single minute. So, this is a fight that will have to, continue to be engaged for decades to come.
Thank you so much, Barbara. And I hear you, and I'm with you on your sentiments about current state. But the memories too that you shared, the Notorious RBG, thank you for sharing her sentiments and her reflections to you on that. And just congratulations to both you and her on that medallion. What an honor, for both of you. So thank you so much, and sharing your thoughts on her legacy. Now, we have a few questions, actually. I'd like to open it up to a few participants who have prepared a few questions for you to continue the conversation. One, we have Terry Garrett from Friends of Guest House with a question for you, Barbara. So Terry, feel free.
Hi, Barbara. Thank you for that amazing story. It's a pleasure. I do have a question because it's a question that I asked early on before I got my rights back to vote. And my question is, why is it so important for women to vote? I mean, what is the purpose behind us voting?
Oh, I love that question. It amazes me that in the United States, that women are so, let's say we're less empowered than women in many other Western, quote, Western democracies and other, democracies. It's very fascinating. I don't know, most people realize that when you talk about political power in the United States, that we are only ranked number 75th in the world for women's political representation. Let's be very clear, that's an improvement. And it would have been worse than that, because before the 2018 elections and the really huge election of women to office, we were ranked 104th in the world. So we've improved to 75th, but is that anything to be proud of? It bothers me that when you look around the state legislatures, you're gonna find out that the average representation of women in state legislatures is about 24%. Thank God for Nevada, the only legislature that's out there that's majority women. So think about that. What does that do to the body politic when you don't have women at the forefront of the body politic? We're 52% of all voters, 52%. Yet we are underrepresented in the Senate, underrepresented in the Congress, and I talk about all women, underrepresented in state legislatures. This makes zero sense. So when you're looking at Grassley, when you're looking at Lindsey Graham, when you're looking at that entire Senate Judiciary Committee that heard the Kavanaugh arguments, when you look at that and you say, why is it all these men? It's because we women have not united the way we need to, and really focused on achieving our political power. And I think all of this goes back to the suffrage movement. It's the intersectional failure of the suffrage movement that hangs over us, that haunts our body politic, because when white women, so many white women during that suffrage movement decided that it was only about white women, and told Black women like Ida B. Wells Barnett to get to the back of the line and not to be seen up front, because it was going to hurt the ability to get women the right to vote, and that the 19th Amendment would not pass if white men thought it was about all women. When they created that dichotomy, when they used racist arguments to justify the 19th Amendment, saying, well, you're giving Black men the right to vote under the 15th Amendment, and they're inferior to us, when those notions of white supremacy and superiority superseded into the women's movement, it, I think, created not only a pale upon that movement, but to this day we suffer from the lack of women to unite, because we never really had a women-based, gender-based perspective and devotion to all women. So I think that's what accounts for a lot of the problems. But if women voted, guess what? When we do surveys of women's attitudes versus men, it's significant. When you do surveys of women of color versus all people, it's a significant difference of what people think just body politics should look like. And I'm not talking about representative, I'm talking about social issues, caring for the poor, caring for those of us who have disabilities, caring for expanding rights for everybody, being more inclusive, being more respectful, housing, job provision, all of these issues. When you look at the delta between women and men on those issues is significant. But also when you look at the delta between youth, young people and older people is significant. So we have groups of with power that don't utilize our power well. I thought 2018 was wonderful. If women would continue that kind of focus on our representation and making sure that we're putting progressive women like we did in 2018 into office, that would be significant. But also, don't forget about youth. I mean, one of the biggest things that's wrong in our body politic is that young women aren't in office. So that's why somebody like AOC blows people's minds, because she is sadly such a rarity. And I want people to realize that, between the ages of 18 to 35 are the dominant body politic. If you look at, if you look at the cohort, that's the ages of 18 to 35, if they registered, if they voted, if they used their political power, they would actually dominate the entire body politic, but they don't. The ages 65 and over are the most dominant cohort of voters, yet they are outnumbered significantly now by the groups between 18 and 35. But if you go to state legislatures again, and you look at representation of people between 18 and 35, you're gonna see average that there are 25 to 30% of the populations, less than 5% usually of those state legislatures. So that's our challenge. So, I just want to put it out there that it's a broad challenge. But if we did what we need to do, we reordered body politics significantly. And I just want to point out quickly that in 2012, young people between 18 and 40, I believe, were something like 16% of all people who voted. And the good news is that in 2018, they were 36%. If you get anything like that happening again in this year, everything becomes very different. And we would see many more women elected to office, apparently hopefully progressive women, and we would see many more young people exerting power.
Shanita, we have a question from Allison.
Hi, thank you so much. I was inspired by what you were talking about with Harriet Tubman, and I've been trying to, in my course, I'm teaching Black literary tradition this fall, and I'm trying to represent some of the stories that are not in the common knowledge. And I asked students, what have you learned? And what did you learn from this video? So I'm pretty good. I listed in the chat, I've included Harriet Tubman, Ida B. Wells, Frances Harper, Sojourner Truth, but I'm not so strong after 1920. So I wondered if you have any suggestions for like short videos or resources that I can post. And my students are overworked, so I'm conscious of just trying to get the word out in a easy format for them about Black women not being enfranchised after the 1920 vote. Thank you.
Whoa, thank you so much. If I may, I'm going to share for just a minute because there's some information that I hope. Ooh, what happened to my screen? Okay. My screen's not doing what it should be doing. All right. Well, anyway, my PowerPoint disappeared, but I'll just tell it. One of the stories that is missing in our history, I watched, the PBS, really amazing series on Black Reconstruction, but I was very upset at the end of it. A good friend of mine, Kim Crenshaw, was part of it and did her best, and she was wonderful. But overall, the series had one amazing flaw, and that was it never talked about the Black women's movement during Reconstruction and post-Reconstruction, because it went post-Reconstruction for a number of years. And one of the things people don't realize is that in 1895 in Boston, Black women held a political convention because they were upset because they were being attacked by national media and portrayed in a very evil, stereotypical way. as being lazy, as being promiscuous, immoral, liars, cheaters, people not worthy of being accorded, dignity. They were incensed that there was this national drumbeat, because this is the drumbeat at that time to really discredit Black people, because there's the re-enslavement movement going on. And of course, Douglas Blackman in his book, Slavery by Another Name, talks a lot about that, and so does Eric Foner, and so does many other writers about this whole, quote, redemption period, where basically it's stereotyping and making African Americans look like horrors. And of course, Birth of a Nation movie in 1920 would be the culmination of that evil era of stereotyping. But Black women come together in 1895 and say this is outrageous, and have a whole political convention. And by the way, another untold story of Harriet Tubman is she keynotes that convention. There is no record of her keynote. I haven't been able to find it yet, although there are other records. But she is one of the keynote speakers. So, people, once again, they don't understand her. They don't get the full meaning of this amazing woman. Moving on, though, post the 19th Amendment, people don't like to talk about what happens post the 19th Amendment. We talk about the great victories, all the women who vote, all the difference. But what we don't talk about is the Black women. Black women fought like crazy for the 19th Amendment, where absolutely the Black Women's Club movement was at its peak, in the early 1900s. It started strongly from 1865, but it became stronger during the early 1900s. And Black Women's Club movement was out there. I mean, Black women were fighting like crazy for the right of all women to vote, and were very prominent suffragists. But what happens is, after the passage of the 19th Amendment, of its enactment, I should say, after the enactment of the 19th Amendment, Black women are being denied the right to vote all over the place. Initially, you have some states where, for some counties might have allowed Black women to vote for a little bit, and then they stop as they realize they're Black, and treat them as they were treating all Blacks then, which is the incredible movement to deny, the Black vote, because all the Black vote is being denied to everybody through voter suppression. In fact, in 1901, the last Black from Reconstruction, even though there have been 16 Black congressmen, the last Black congressperson is George White, and he leaves Congress and says, I predict that, like the phoenix, the Negro will rise again, because of all the voter suppression. And his farewell speech to Congress is mandatory reading. In my classes, I make everybody read it. 1901, his speech to Congress, his farewell speech, because he goes through all the voter suppression, all the evilness that's being done to deny the Black vote, all the massacres, all the killings, all the maimings. I mean, he goes through it. It's an incredibly brilliant speech. And it's, of course, it's within his time. But after the 19th Amendment, Annie Mae Clemens from North Carolina, writes to the National Women's Political Party and says, Black women are being denied the right to vote. We have fought for this amendment. We need you to make this a cause célèbre in Congress. We need you to run a national campaign to make people aware that not all women are being given the right to vote. We need you to demand that our allies in Congress, the same allies that passed the 19th Amendment, that they pass superseding legislation to demand that all women be given the right to vote. The answer from, and there's good paper trail here, the answer from the National Women's Political Party is speeches. It's sad. It's very, very, very weak. It's like, oh, we're so sorry to hear that you are suffering and that you're not able to vote. We wish, there was some way that Congress would take this up, but we doubt that that's going to be likely. I mean, it's that kind of an answer. It's a no answer. It's a non-answer. And she's not the only person writing them. There's several Black women writing to the Women's National Political Party saying, please do something. We're not being allowed to vote. We're being beaten. We're being denied this right when we try to vote. And nobody comes to their aid. At the same time, ironically, in Virginia, there is Maggie Lena Walker. You should know Maggie Lena Walker. There's a statue to her on Broad Street in Richmond that was erected in 2017. Oh my, it took a while. It took a while, almost 100 years, for her to deserve her recognition. But Maggie Lena Walker was once again one of those major suffragists who fought for all women to have the right to vote. And let me be very clear, she wasn't just a suffragist like many of the women who were. She had multiple layers to her, and she was one of the first Black women millionaires in this country. She founded a bank. She had other businesses. She was extremely successful. And thank you. I see people are posting, articles and other things about Maggie. And she also, what was really significant about her for 1921, 22, 23, 24, she ran the voter registration drives in Virginia for all women to be registered to vote. In fact, the Richmond Dispatch, or whatever the paper was, does a major article on her and talks about how she's enrolling all and registering all these white women to vote. And she becomes the first Black woman to run for statewide office. She runs as, for Secretary of State on a Black political party ticket. Amazing woman, just amazing. Her bank only was alienated from her family name in the last 10 years, I believe. That's how powerful her legacy was. An amazing woman, who we should know about, because Black women fought for everybody. That's our history, is that we rarely just fight only for our race. We have that ability to transcend and to be universalists about any struggle for justice. And we see the struggle in a very broad way, because we understand an injustice to one is an injustice to all. We understand that all of us stand in the breach, all of us stand in danger when any of us are attacked. So that is, just one of the fundamental realities for Black women. So thank you for that question.
Wow, thank you so much for that, Barbara. I have a million resources and things I need to look up as a result of just this. Thank you so much for just sharing that background, your passion, and really challenge us to think about the power, right? The power of the collective, the power of coming together, transcending just self, and really thinking about the collective good in everything.
Yes.
Ourselves in positions to help one another. That's where we really, that's unity. We all come together and can help one another. So, no, thank you for that. We have another question from Michael Evans, a SNU staff member. Michael, would you like to share your question?
Thanks, Shanita, and good morning, Barbara, and thank you for a wonderful talk. This has been fascinating.
Oh, thank you.
The current voter suppression activities that are going on right now are often done under the guise of preventing voter fraud, even though studies consistently show that the incidence of voter fraud in this country is minuscule. But we're also in this era of fake news, where anything that's uncomfortable is simply dismissed as fake. So in this environment, how can we help people understand that the voter suppression that's going on is a deliberate attempt to keep certain groups of people in power?
Thank you so much for your question. Thank you. Thank you, Michael, so much for that. One of the things we have to do is engage in really strong voter education. I have a piece that I created that you can find at votingrightsalliance.org, Voting Rights alliance.org called 61 Forms of Voter Suppression. And it basically speaks to this modern era that we live in of voter suppression. Remember my circle showing us going from vote denial to vote denial. We are in the age of modern day voter suppression. How did we get there? It actually, started in 2000 during the Bush versus Gore, contests, where we did see, a lot of modeling, a lot of programs that were used to deny African Americans and Latinos the right to vote all throughout the country. Even though everybody was only focusing on Florida, we saw it, but it got really worse after 2008 when President Obama was elected. And what happened was that in 2010, 25 million people who voted in 2008 for the presidential election did not vote for the midterm. Just did not, stayed home, did not vote because everybody was so, what I call the Obama glamour. Everybody was just so happy, so shocked, so great, just, oh, our nation has changed. Some people were talking about post-racialism, all this madness. But a lot of people stayed home and they did not vote. As a consequence, 30 state legislatures became solidly one party. And that party became determined, as the people had said after Obama was elected that would never happen again. They became determined to destroy what was called the Obama coalition, which were, the unity of Blacks, Asians, Latinos, Native Americans, and young progressive whites, single women, all of this. And they looked at who the components of that Obama coalition were and said, we'll never let that happen again. So we're going to basically pass voter restriction laws. So literally by January 1st of 2011, states start introducing as emergency legislation all kinds of proposed bills to restrict the right to vote. By April of 2011, there are over 40 states in which 100 pieces of voter restriction legislation has been introduced. I produced what's called the map of shame during that time. And literally, I'm saying to people all over the country, look at what's happening. This is dangerous. This can, this will destroy, any progressive, any, multicultural coalition, because they're targeting Blacks and Browns and Native Americans, within this framework. And they're going after, single women, and they're really targeting students bad in this framework under these acts. So they're enacting everything from cuts to early voting. They're enacting everything from getting rid of same-day voter registration that exists in various states. They're reducing polling places and consolidating polling places to make it harder for people to find a way to vote. They're enacting exact signature match, which is knocking out, as we talk, tens of thousands of ballots daily in this country. They started enacting for the first time across the country. Many of the states started enacting what was called strict photo ID laws. Now imagine all these, some 40 plus presidents have been elected without these laws, but they suddenly need these laws. I always say that the democracy, the demographics, deciding what kind of democracy we're getting right now. And so as a consequence, when I'm saying, look at this map of shame, people are saying to me, don't you dare say another word, shut up, basically. And in fact, much harsher than that, because we have a Black president. That shows that we've come a long ways. You're in denial. You're promoting conspiracy theories. In fact, I had TV host, what you would call MSNBC and other places, saying they didn't want to hear about voter suppression. Fortunately, Melissa Harris Perry had her show, and she actually heard me speak, and she started giving me a weekly segment on her national show to talk about this week in voter suppression. And we started teaching people that term, and people like Chris Matthews were infuriated that we were talking about voter suppression. But eventually, people started coming around as they saw the really ugly effects of it. And in 2016, voter suppression, you could say everything you can about the candidates and about the weakness in candidate appeal, et cetera, and all of these issues that dominated 2016, but voter suppression dominated 2016. And what people don't know is that we had estimated that in normal operations, the African-American vote should have increased by 8%. We had estimated that in normal operations that the Latino vote would have exploded in its numbers and turnout. We had these estimates based on projections, based on population figures, etc. Instead, in 2016, African-American voting participation, turnout dropped significantly. Not only did the turnout drop, but so did the ballots uncounted. You got to remember, it's turnout and it's also ballot spoilage. 1.9 million ballots in this country spoiled in 2016. Tossed out is what I'm saying, not counted, even though people went to the polls and tried to vote. So we lost, I believe in this process, over 1 million African-American votes. And that is why, in this year, we got to have a whole different, understanding. So when people hear about voter suppression, Michael, the beauty is they get it. They know there's something inherently wrong with these long lines that you see in Black polling districts that you don't see in white ones. They know there's something inherently wrong with these attacks on students and not wanting to have, when we could have on polling places on campuses. They know there's something wrong when legislatures are trying to change residency requirements to make it harder for students to vote. They get it, because most Americans believe in one thing, and that's fairness when it comes to the voting. They believe that you should have the ability to elect people based on who the people want to serve, and not people putting their hands on the scales and tipping them in the favor of one political party or the other. That's why redistricting is such a problem. We could talk about that forever. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to say that you're right, that that's a real need for people to understand, and we got to teach it, because when we teach it, people go, whoa. Some people say, oh, don't teach it because you're going to discourage voters. My experience is that when you teach it, people go, wait a darn minute. This is why my vote is important. This is why I need to get out there and vote, and I'm not going to let anybody take my vote away. So you got to understand that there's as we're talking right now, there's about 200 court contests going on over the right to vote. Everything from in Georgia, where they're trying to overturn a district court opinion that said, let's extend the time for absentee ballots to be received. And the GOP is fighting that in Georgia as we talk. People are fighting drop boxes. They only want there to be drop boxes for people to turn in their vote by mail so that they don't have to worry about postage. They don't have to worry about the USPS. They're fighting to not have drop boxes. And they won some of these battles. They're fighting on the exact signature match, knowing that people's signatures change over time. But they're saying you can't vote and we're going to toss your ballot. Literally, they're throwing out ballots because the signatures don't match. And North Carolina, they said, oh, well, at least, we can notify you. You can come in, and if you can get it to us in time. Of course, not a lot of people can do that. And in Pennsylvania, they're saying, too bad. If your signature doesn't match, I'm sorry, in Pennsylvania, they said, yes, we're not going to allow you to have a restriction on signature matches. So these are, every state having their own voting rights framework. It's a problem. We absolutely need more universal frameworks for voting.
Thank you for that, Barbara. Great great information. And one of the key things is like education is power, and having the knowledge and understanding of how it works and empower you to make the right decision for yourself, which is exercise that vote when in doubt, right? Make sure you educate yourself to know how to do that. We have one more question before we open it up to the rest of the audience for more questions from our SNU student, Terrell Longsworth. Terrell, would you like to share your question? Here you go.
Yeah. Hello.
Hi, Terrell.
I guess my question is, what can people do to make sure people have equal access to vote?
There's a lot people can do. Whoa, there's so much people can do. I think that's the biggest misunderstood thing right now. It's not just about the lawyers, because we lawyers, we're gonna do what we have to do in the courts, but it's about the ground game. This election will ultimately be won or lost based on the ground game. And the ground game is the ability to talk to every voter, to reach the voters, to make sure that voters understand how to correctly fill out vote by mail. Believe it or not, people don't know that, Terrell, they don't know that in certain states, if it says black ink, you better use black ink. In fact, that's true anywhere. If they tell you a certain color ink, you must use that color. Don't be pulling out your fraternity colors, and don't be doing any of that, because the ballot cannot be read by the machines if people use the wrong ink. We should be telling people that. We should be telling people everywhere, vote early. That's the key to this election. Don't wait. Don't wait until that last week. Don't wait until that on election day, because the reality of your having to be frustrated and standing in long lines is significant if you wait. What do you do if you're in the states where they don't have early voting? Because there are such states, I'm sad to say. And what do? We've been, working with administrators. We've been doing everything we can to make sure that people know that in some of these states you can use absentee balloting to vote early. So we're trying to engage in voter education. Voters don't understand that if they write any extraneous marks on their vote by mail, such as "Go Biden," "Love you, Kamala," or "I'm pro-Trump," whatever, or "I'm so glad I voted." Any extraneous mark is read by the machine as an error, and it kicks the ballot out, and it won't be read. People don't understand that they can't put two ballots in the same envelope. Each ballot has to be put in the return envelope that was specified for you. If you're in one of those ugly states that have these inner security envelopes, you got to use them. You can't decide, well, I don't want to be bothered with that. You have to put your ballot inside that inner security envelope, and you got to put that inside of the ballot, inside of the return envelope. You got to do it. If your state has pre-postage, fantastic, send it. But if you're required to put postage on it, make sure you have the right amount of postage. And make sure that we're telling people right now, as the Voting Rights Alliance, we're telling people, if you don't test your ballot this week, then you better be thinking about going to the polls to vote. Because the reality is with the USPS being so crippled, mail is just horrible. And even priority mail is a problem. I paid for a package to go to St. Louis, paid all this money for it to be delivered next day. Didn't happen. Took it 2 days late. And that was FedEx. So, and that was $125 some. So I just want people to understand that, that you have to have a plan. If you're going to request a ballot, you're in one of those states where you do have to request a ballot. 9 states you don't, thank God, that they send you your ballot directly, including the District of Columbia. That's wonderful. But in other states, you must affirmatively apply for your ballot. And you have to do that this week to give yourself enough time for them to receive your requests and enough time for you to vote it, and return it for it to be received on time. We're telling people nationwide that if you don't put your ballot in the mail by October 13th, then go vote in person. You'll take your ballot with you, turn it in at the place, and vote in person, because the reality again is you got to give the Postal Service 3 weeks to get your ballot in. So we're telling people these things that, be practical, but every one of you can tell somebody this. Guess what else you can do? There's something else that's very powerful you can do. Voter registration is still open in every state. The first voter registration deadline is October the 5th. And that's, in a couple states, there's October the 5th. Most voter registration deadlines are, in the middle of the month of October. But what you can do right now because of that is you can talk to every friend you know and say, are you registered to vote? And if they say, I'm not sure, or yeah, I think I am, whatever, you can help them to check their voter registration. And also, if you haven't voted a lot recently, you want to check the status of your voter registration, period. Because, I had a friend who voted in the primaries, Terrell, and when she went to vote recently, she was told she wasn't registered to vote. She just voted, and she found out that she wasn't registered to vote. So purging is happening. 18 million people have been purged. 18 million people are on the inactive list, which means that they will not be sent a vote by mail ballot or absentee ballot. They have to vote in person. They got to cure whatever that problem is. So you want to get ahead of all of this by checking and verifying your voter registration status. And that you can do that at vote.org. Vote.org. There's a whole lot of other tools out there. When we all vote, yes, all of these tools are great. Use them, check your voter registration status. But also, anybody you know who tells you, Terrell, that they don't know if they're voted, if they're registered to vote, and you look it up and they're not, you can register them. They can register themselves through vote.org. And it takes 5 minutes, everybody. 2 minutes to check, 5 minutes to actually register. These are things we can do. Every civic organization in this country that's worth its salt, every religious institution ought to be having what I call voter contact systems, where you're calling your memberships and making sure people know when early voting starts, making sure people have checked and verified their voter registration status, making sure they know how they can actually register, and using, the vote.org tool. The other tool that people don't know is out there is called Map the Vote. Map the Vote is fabulous because it's going to tell you who is registered on your block and who's not. So you're going to be able to look at your own community directly, and you can, talk to your neighbors when you see that they're not registered and talk to them. We have to be the ground troops in this fight. We got to understand there's a war on the right to vote, and the only way you win any war is that you got to fight. And we have the ability to fight with our own direct contact tools to those we know, utilizing very simple tools that are out there. It bothers me significantly that the states are so bad at voter education. It bothers me significantly that the states don't reach out to voters. They're doing most of their outreach, 90% of it through the internet, when they know there's a digital divide. That's why what we're doing throughout the country is we're organizing voter awareness marches. So we're literally sponsoring motorcades that go through communities and make all kind of noise and make people aware that early voting is happening in those states, in their city, that's urging them to come with us to the polls. And we're having people vote on the spot, register on the spot, turn in their vote by mail, because that's the best thing to do. If you can't put it in a drop box, take it to your Board of Elections, where they allow and turn it in, or take it to the polling sites and turn it in. That's, you know, what you need to do. So there's so much, Terrell, that we can do. We can win this fight, but only if we.
Nadine had another question. Nadine, if you'd like to jump in and ask. I've unmuted you.
Okay, thank you. Barbara, I think you just did in your last wonderful explanation of all the things we can do. You answered my question, which was because earlier when you were citing all the horrific obstacles that have been set up, I wanted to like that we didn't walk away in a kind of the state of despair, which becomes so paralyzing. And I think you really just empowered all of us to find out exactly what we can do, where we are, and to do it now. And that means like Jerry and I are living overseas because of my work. And so we're working through Democrats Abroad. And I know Angela's doing the same thing in France. And I know many of you are doing that. But Terrell, like really what Barbara said to you, like talk to your fellow students, talk to your neighbors, talk to every member of your family. I mean, we can win this, but we have to show up for this fight. And we need to keep hope alive. We absolutely need to keep hope alive, because if we despair, because there's a lot to despair about, but if we despair, then we are giving in to those who want to suppress the vote. And I can say this, and I can be here today because of Shirley Chisholm. And, you know, if there was ever the brilliant master recognizing how racism, sexism, classism are inextricably interconnected, and we all have to work for each other in order for there to be any justice in our society, let's all be Shirley Chisholm today.
Absolutely. And thank you for that. Oh, yes. And I love that t-shirt. But I just wanted to, you know, to say that one thing people really underestimate is that most people don't vote because they don't think people want them to vote. They really believe that. And I don't blame them for believing it, because walk outside your house, drive up your street if you want to, and show me one poster, one billboard, anything that tells people we really need you to vote. We hope you will vote. Please vote. You know, and the date of the voting, unless it's a candidate. I'm talking about from the states, from the cities, from the counties, anything that is urging voters just to vote. Instead, it's all partisan. It's all about, you know, their candidate and electing their candidate, and people get sick of that. They want to hear that they are important because of who they are, because they have a viewpoint, because they have a knowledge, because they want a certain kind of society, and that's what their vote is about, that they're demanding that. You know, and there's, you know, tools like Vote Smart that will tell you anything you want to know about candidates. A lot of people don't vote because they say they don't understand, they don't know enough about the people they're trying to elect. Full ballot. We always say to people, vote full ballot. If you don't like what's going on with the Breonna Taylor case, if you don't want to see that in your own city, if you're mad about, you know, policing, if you're mad about the schools, and there's people you should be voting for. You should be voting for your sheriff, voting for your judges, voting for your district attorney. Who makes the decisions about how to charge people and not charge people? Who makes the decisions as to what kind of case they present to the grand jury? That's your district attorney. I mean, so there's so many, our state's attorney, however it's classified in your area. Those are the positions that you need to be thinking about. Superintendent of schools, you know, all kinds of, you know, you got to look at, you know, your governors and, you know, and your attorney generals. All these positions are critical in addition to the presidential, in addition to the senatorial. The Senate is going to decide who are the judges. We got some ugly looking people who have been put on the court. And I'm not talking about that they're not pretty. I'm talking about they don't believe in Brown versus Board of Education. These are people who are old school neo-Confederates who have been put on the courts recently. And that's the Senate's fault. because all the president can do is nominate, the Senate confirms. So the Senate votes, how you vote for your Congress people, all that is so important. And one person once said to me something that was so, has always stayed with me. He said, Barbara, and he was actually talking to a whole group of people. He said, everyone, he says, the biggest mistake we make in life is that we underestimate our own personal power. Says you never understand that how powerful you are, no matter where you sit. You don't have to have a big title. You don't have to have your wealth. You don't have to have the best degree. It's based on your understanding that if you talk to people, if you have friends, family, that you can move people by educating them, by encouraging them. In 2017, the most powerful woman in Alabama was a Black woman who said, I don't have a degree, I don't have a job, but I had a car, and I had money for gas. And she took 100 people to the polls. That, you gotta really understand that wherever we sit, we're powerful. That wherever we sit, if we live to unleash our personal power as part of our lifestyle, then your whole life will be a life-changing experience for others. So thank you so much.
Barbara, what an incredible time with you today. Can we give her some air snaps? Just, this has been
thank you.
A wonderful, educational, empowering session, really just reflecting on our history and our present and what we can do today. So as I reflect on what I heard and the things that really resonate with me is, and I think Nadine, you summed it up really well, as you said, there are things we can do today. Yes. We have the power, like you said, Barbara, we have the power to activate our given agency to make a difference in this world through the power of the vote. And all of the tips that you gave us about being diligent and having a plan about our vote is so critical. And so for me, when I think about all of the things you shared, education is so important. Making sure that we take the time to learn more about where we stand with our current vote. How do we educate ourselves? Are we registered? Are our friends registered? How can we educate ourselves and others? But also, how do we come together as a collective? Because we need each other. Just like this circle of a community of people, we need each other. And how do we continue to advocate, not just for ourselves, but for the broader community? Because injustice in one, like you said, Barbara, is injustice for all. So we want to make sure that we come together with that. I also like the part that was said about amplifying the voices of others as well. The power of being able to see somebody else in their story and share that story with other people. We have a lot of work to do to continue to do that, but anytime we can empower someone else by amplifying their voice, take advantage of that time. And then the last thing that I'll note is don't give up. Don't give up. This is still an opportunity. We have our vote. We have an opportunity to exercise it. And while it may look like there are challenges, we have the agency and power within us and use our power to influence others to do the same. So thank you so much, Barbara, and this entire circle for our time together today. I'll turn it over to Theo to wrap up. Thank you, Barbara.
And can I just say thank you, Shanita. You give me hope. You make me happy. You are inspiring. Because, we all live to see future generations, just taking over, and you're powerful now, and you're showing your leadership. Don't let anybody tell you got to wait. You are in the moment. Tell us and show us how to get it done. And thank you, Nadine, for recommending me to be part of this program.
Okay, this has really been an incredible circle. And I want to, on behalf of Global Citizens Circle, Southern New Hampshire University, and the New Hampshire Women's Foundation, I want to thank everyone for being here. And I especially want to thank you, Barbara and Shanita, for leading us in this really incredible conversation. We know there's still work for all of us to do in order to ensure that everyone has the access to vote and that their vote counts. And Barbara, you're just an example and an inspiration to all of us in leading the way. And you can see that you've been an inspiration this morning just by looking at the chat box. Before we end this morning, I also want to thank the co-organizers for this event, Elizabeth Richards, who directs the Southern New Hampshire University's Chandler Center, Kayla Page, who directs Southern New Hampshire University's Office of Diversity Programs, Brooke Gilmore, who was the director of the Deborah Cohen Women's Center, and Phoebe Delarabidi, Global Citizen Circle's Assistant Director. We've been, as Elizabeth said first at the very beginning, we've been planning this program for almost a year, I think, and it was planned to be on this new campus, and it was really, to come to this day, it was really a team effort, and I want to thank and acknowledge all of them. One last thing that I would also like to mention is that in October we will be doing, if you were inspired and interested in this discussion and want to participate in the future, on October 28th, in honor of Global Dignity Day, we will be doing a program on healing divisions and embracing our common humanity in the midst of polarization. So we hope to see you in the future. You have given us so much to think about, Barbara, and again, thank you so much. I'm just going to pass this over to Elizabeth for a last comment that she has, and then as always, we will stay on if people want to continue talking, and people often do, but because I know many of you have other things you have to go to do, please feel free to do that, but stay on if you'd like. We'll be chatting for a while. We're not going anywhere. So Elizabeth, do you want to say one last thing?
I do. Thank you so much. I just very quickly, at the beginning of the recording, I should have done this, but now we're going to do it at the end, to say that the opinions expressed today neither represent the opinions of Southern New Hampshire University or its trustees, nor are endorsed by Southern New Hampshire University. Thank you, everybody, so much for being here. It was wonderful to see you. And like Theo said, we're happy to stick around for people who want to chat. But for everybody else, have a wonderful day.